You're listening to Watching Paint Dry. I'm your host, Emma Jane Palin, and today's episode, I'm chatting to Margate-based singer-songwriter Lo Barnes on all things music and home. Lo joined me back at the beginning of renovation for some initial colour swatching, and as always, immediately brought a sense of calm to the space. She's just that kind of girl. Lo's haunting rock and roll melodies are some of the first I turn to when I need to set the vibe in my home. I'm talking sultry, 60s-inspired heartbreak melancholia and Tarantino-esque beats that flood the room with emotion and a distinct style. I was in no doubt that I wanted to feature a musician on the podcast to discuss the intersectionality between interiors and music. And with Lo often being someone I turn to for the deeper chats in life, she made for the perfect guest. As much as this podcast is about home, it's also about the people within them. And with Lo certainly not afraid to confront the harder topics in life, I really wanted to touch on the struggles of being an unsigned female act, as well as how this has shaped her own home. As a touring artist, Lo has played with the likes of the Libertines, the Heavy, and Band of Skulls. She's previously spent a lot of time on the road, and it's only in the last few years that she's managed to lay down some roots. I think there's something quite interesting about creating a home that truly wraps you up when you need it. And Lo and I discussed how she's crafted a home that encourages creativity, but also acts as a place of respite when it's needed. On that note, I'll leave you to enjoy our conversation. Please do feel free to drop me a message on social media to add your thoughts to the mix. Lo, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
You're a musician, you're a creative. It was so important for me to have you on here just because I feel like there's such crossover between music and home. I'm a big Velvet Underground, that whole ethos of music meets fashion meets art. So I just really wanted to chat to you about all of those things. First thing I want to dive into is like home in the literal sense, like coordinates. You are now based in Margate. Can you tell me how Margate came to be home?
Yeah, so I moved to Margate almost 2 years ago. I'm from London. I've been living in Bath for like 4 years before I moved here. And I had one friend that had just moved down, and I was looking outside of London, and I came down and had a few visits. It was like the dead of winter. So it was like locals only kind of vibe, like out of season, and hanging out in like some of the coffee shops and just going for beach walks and that kind of thing. And I was really lucky that the friend that I was hanging out with already knew a few people that were down here, and I just ended up having like really sweet conversations with locals and people that you're sat next to in coffee shops and things like that. And most of the people that I met were creatives, and they were all really open and really curious and like unpretentious and interested and kind of willing to share. The sorts of people that are like, oh, you're a musician. I know someone that's a producer that lives down there. Have you heard of this guy? Maybe I'll introduce you. Just very open, willing to share resources. Like it just had a really kind of, curious, open nature to it straight away. And I felt really, I don't know, I think that's quite a rare thing to experience, especially, you kind of hope that you're going to get that experience from a small town, but sometimes it can go the other way. And that people are almost a bit like, not territorial, but that would also be like a very natural response. I was just immediately like, oh, I can see myself feeling really welcomed here. And then that's totally how it's been. It's been like that and more.
Yeah, I think that there's something super special about Margate. And for a little bit of context, my husband is actually in Lo's band. And through that, we've become really good friends as well. I've been over to Lo's house many a time now. It's very welcoming and warm and cool, laid back. It feels just very you. And I think that is something that, again, I link into sort of your music background. And obviously, as a musician, home is important. Like it's where you get creative. And so have you kind of set up your space to reflect that?
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think so much of the time that I spend being actively creative is in my house, to the point where, I have to have like a little baby acoustic guitar, like literally next to my bed on the side that I sleep, so that when I'm falling asleep, if I have a creative idea, I can just like grab it at like midnight and just gently sort of like strum the chords so that I don't wake up my my housemate who's in the next room. But yeah, I don't have anything like a studio set up in the house. I would love to have something like that longer term. But I did think about it when I moved in. I've got like a kind of bay window at the front of the house in the living room. And one of the first things I did when I moved in was put like a window seat in, but I had it fitted to the exact height of my guitar amp so that I could fit my guitar amp underneath it. So I just knew that it was going to be like out of the sun, out of view from the street, but also like accessible to me in a space where I know I'm going to be sat and hanging out.
I have seen the storage and it is so functional. And when I saw it, I was like, Josh's amps are the bane of my life. Like they look so cool, but they just get in the way.
Yeah.
So that is a top tip for any musicians or wives or husbands of musicians. In the same respect, as much as you're at home as a musician, you're also not at home a lot. So has that made it really important to you to have like this safe space that you come back to? Like, how do you make home away from home as a touring musician?
Yeah, it's such a thing. I used to do a lot more session work where you'd be sort of living out of a tour bus for like 2 or 3 weeks at a time and have the space of about a coffin for your belongings and your personal space for that entire period. So it definitely becomes like a specific skill to feel comfortable wherever you are. But then it does mean that coming home feels really luxurious when you get home. But also if you run in any of those kind of cycles of like touring and then writing and then recording, that actually in that kind of writing homey, like once you're back home phase, it can also be a little bit like claustrophobic. So it's also important that like you like your surroundings, that you feel comfortable where you are, that you're sort of reminded of who you are in the world a little bit by your surroundings. And it was interesting you saying earlier that like the home, my home makes you think of me, if that makes sense, that like the space kind of suits me. And I think that's become really important to me, that like the things that I see around me remind me who I am and what's important to me as a person, whether that's having art that inspires me on the walls, or like my living room is a really dark kind of, almost like it's not black at all, but it's sort of dark enough that your mind almost feels like it could be black. It's a kind of blue-grey tone. And it just feels kind of badass and like quite rock and roll in there and really cozy and quite, I don't know, I want to feel like I can feel tough when I'm in my PJs on the sofa still. There's like a little bit of that badassery still like comes into my day-to-day life.
I'd say it's almost part of your image to a certain degree. Like it feels like we've obviously worked on sort of shoots together and things like that. It genuinely feels like an extension of your creativity, which obviously I love to see. Like I don't really have design taste that I love. I just love to see homes that are a reflection of a person. So even if someone is the exact opposite style to me, or I wouldn't do that in my own home, I just love seeing people that are brave enough to make those choices and really sort of develop this space that is just so them.
Yeah.
I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about everything that also goes alongside being a musician. So you're unsigned, DIY, self-publishing, however you want to phrase that. So it's not just about picking up a guitar. It's about the marketing, the doing the shoots, you know, everything that comes with promoting yourself as a person. So how do you navigate that? Or doing all of those things in one space? Like your home needs to be multi-purpose.
Yeah, and I think it does need to be multi-purpose, and I guess that there's definitely like a privilege and a luxury in being able to have like a dining room that I can use as a desk because I don't need to share it with like lots of other people or a family. You know, I don't have kids, so there's like there aren't other priorities like that I'm jostling with in the home. And my housemate is also a musician, so we understand the practicals of having amps everywhere and kind of having like needing to work from home to get the other side of what we do musically done. But I think also it kind of ties in a bit for me with what you were saying about the coordinates of where you live, that like having a local coffee shop that you like to work from outside of being at home so that you don't get overly familiar with your four walls kind of a feeling. I mean, that's a lovely experience and really important as well, you know. And I think quite often when I'm going, because I'm sort of in a bit of an admin cycle at the moment, I'm putting out a release right now, so I'm kind of in the back end phase of music. So like the writing's done, the recording's done, we're about to do a gig, and I'm in that kind of prelim phase of like, okay, just checking that I've got my marketing content ready for when that comes out, and sorting out my merch and making designs for, we're making some cassettes, and I just had to design like what they call the J card, like insert cardboard bit that goes inside the plastic case. And I've never done that before. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, man, I'm so mentally fatigued at the moment. I wonder why. And it's like, yeah, because literally everything I'm doing, I haven't done before. And that really also reminds me of how I felt when I moved into my house, because I was like, figuring it, like talking to electricians about wiring and making sure that things were okay with the plumbing, and like learning where the stop tap is. I don't even know what it's called, like in case there was a freeze or whatever.
I still don't know if I know where that is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's such a great point, actually, because that overwhelm and the decision fatigue that you get when you move into a house is, people really struggle with it. And I think that is actually often why some people just can't do anything. Like they can't even face it, as like that. It's just very overwhelming, isn't it? Also want to give a shout out to Forts for being the ultimate coffee shop.
Ultimate coffee experience.
For providing some respite from the four walls.
Yeah.
I do want to get a little bit deeper, just in the sense of something that we often talk about when it comes to DIY, particularly the more practical side of things. We often talk about, you know, being a woman in that sphere. And I know that you're very vocal about being a woman in music and all of the basically the extra struggles that you face as a woman in music. Like it's not something that we actually are presented with much. Like you don't really think about it until you maybe come across someone that's speaking about it. Can you tell me a bit about your experience as a woman in the music industry?
Yeah, totally. I think I'm really happy that this is something that you wanted to talk about today, because I think, you know, it's something that, like you said, both of our sort of, I mean, industries is like a really cold, big word, but, you know, both of these kind of worlds that we live in have this similar struggle. And you know, very often, I think my predominant experience is that very often when I'm at a show and I'm in like a backstage area, I'm most of the time the only woman that's in that space. You know, I don't meet a lot of people that aren't men who run venues, who do the sound, who are in bands. Like it's just a very literally male-dominated space. I think I'm quite lucky in that I have quite a bossy and authoritative tone, like quite naturally. So I haven't had too many experiences where people don't take me seriously, but that's partly just because I have like a little bit of like a mask passing energy about me sometimes, which is like a whole other thing, right? Yeah. It's like I think it's important that people that don't fit into like masculine stereotypes of the way that they present in certain spaces are still heard and deserve respect and aren't belittled, you know? But I'm kind of aware that like I think I've skirted past like a lot of instances where I maybe wouldn't have been so listened to, because I'm just quite like, hi, I'm in charge. If you have questions, you can talk to me, kind of an energy.
Direct, not bossy.
Thank you.
Bossy is a bad word when it comes to women. I think we don't call men bossy.
So true.
So yeah, direct is the word.
Yeah.
And something I've also heard and picked up on is even like in dressing rooms, a lack of mirror. Like again, to bring it back to interiors, like not having a mirror, which as a female artist, as a male artist even, like that's just a small thing that makes a difference to do your hair and makeup. Like
yeah, and even I guess more practical things like there isn't ever really like a changing room, so you need to feel really physically comfortable with the people that you're working with. Quite often there might not even be separate rooms between like your band and the other band. So say if you're a support artist and you're supporting a band that like you really respect and they've kind of I want to use the word hogged the space, but it's kind of appropriate that they would hog the space and like take up room. And so as a support artist, you're kind of like, oh, excuse me. And then you end up getting dressed into your stage outfit in a toilet cubicle where there's like not even a hook on the bathroom stall door and things like that. It's
my pet peeve.
Right? It's like these little design things, like you were saying, that just show that someone's taken into consideration, like not just the female experience, but just like practical things that like help everyone, you know? And you look at artists like David Bowie, who would do like a full face of makeup for like a significant era of his career. It's like not even necessarily like a woman's problem that we don't have mirrors in those spaces. It's like, do you want us to put on a show? Because like we want to look the part, we want to present, you know, a fantasy or some kind of like world to you. So you can enable us to do that if you want to.
That's why I see like such a link between like interiors and music, because it is all about creating this world and like putting on some kind of show. You do that to an audience, whereas I'm like come into my home and like experience it. But it's so, there are such parallels there.
Can I ask you what you mean when you say that music is part of your like design choice process?
I think it's just always been part of me. I've always been that girl that, you know, goes to gigs, goes to festivals. I'm so drawn to artwork. Like that used to, when I was studying, I studied graphic design. So Storm Thorgerson was like someone that I absolutely loved and just obsessed over all of the artwork for like Pink Floyd. I just used to go around searching for good record covers, essentially. And now that's just something like when I'm designing a room, I'm always thinking about like where can the record player go? How can I incorporate, you know, album artwork, speakers? Like it's all very, very important to me. And I think as well, obviously being married to a musician, and previous relationships have also been with musicians. Like there's always been guitars.
Yeah.
So I'll always have a guitar somewhere in a room.
You're gonna have to factor it in somewhere.
Yeah. I like the guitars. I'm just not a fan of the amps because they're so big. And I'm also not a fan of all of the wires.
Oh my God, tell me about it.
And Josh just ordered two 15 feet?
No, I actually don't
Basically,
know.
Josh thinks you're playing Pyramid Stage at Glastonbury next year and has...
Fingers crossed.
Get in touch, guys. So yeah, we have so much equipment, and you have to be really clever with that.
Totally.
I just love the vibe. It's more the vibe of like, I feel like when you come into my living room, you will go like take a seat and you want to put on a record, you want to listen to music, like that's your first instinct. And I feel like that's actually the same at your house as well. Like that darker living, like I want to like light candles and sit in the dark and listen to music.
That's definitely the vibe.
Like to bring it full circle, like I feel like that's quite a bold choice to make in terms of like decor. Like how have you become empowered to make those kinds of decisions? Like everything I'm trying to do with our curated abode is sort of empowering people to be bold and to do things and let their environment kind of have a positive impact on them. So how do you think that you have made that happen in your home?
You know what? It's really interesting because I moved into the house 2 summers ago and I did everything that I was gonna do, and I haven't done anything since in like 5 weeks. And I'm really lucky that when I moved in, I didn't have to do anything like too major. Pretty much all I did was like paint the shared spaces and the bedrooms. And I did paint all the wooden floors downstairs as well, which was like a whole other thing. My God, working out how to paint yourself out of a living room, like corridor out of the house with like oil-based wood paint was just insane. But I think I had a couple really strong ideas in my head. One was that I wanted the living room to be really dark, and I wanted the dining room and some of the bedrooms to feel really warm and cozy and have like a kind of sandy tone. And those are pretty much the 2 only real vibes I had, inclinations that I had kind of going into the house. And I just, it was kind of my first time being single for quite a long time when I moved into the house. I didn't have to share that decision-making process with anyone. There was no one I needed to like cross-check that with. And I was just like, I'm just gonna do it. What could possibly go wrong? I'm just gonna go for it.
And I'm assuming you felt so much better from doing that.
Yeah, 100%. I enjoyed it so much, but it was an interesting process because I'd made a lot of decisions really quickly. I moved into the house with no furniture, so all of the furniture that's in the house I bought within that 5 weeks. Basically, I made really quick impulse decisions. I don't really think it's the way that people would recommend that you do things, but it's been really fascinating living with those choices since then and being like, oh, I'm actually really happy with what I did. And I feel, I was quite bold, and I think I'm really pleased. I think I managed to pull it off. And when I say pull it off, I mean that I'm still happy with it, as opposed to like, I don't know, there might be a grander version of what pull it off means in someone else's eyes, but I was just like, I like being there. So
I think you just made it very you. So actually maybe by giving yourself that time limit to do it, you made choices that were just very you rather than overthinking it. Sometimes there is a lot of overthinking in the home of like what's going to look good or what might be on track, like things that don't really matter actually. It's just what you like, the colours that you like, the things that you're drawn to.
I think the choices that you make are ultimately just like an extension of you. So it's nice to see yourself reflected like back into the space that you're in. Yeah,
absolutely. And again, to bring it back to me and the shop.
Of course.
That is exactly what the ethos will be here when doing like consultations and things like that. It's all about like the people and the person and getting to know them rather than it being like, here is your design, let's put it in your house.
Yeah,
and like not actually getting to grips with who they are, what they do, what they like. For me, that's just so important in interiors. To finish off, firstly, thank you very much for watching paint dry with me.
Oh, anytime. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm going to do a little quick fire round because we want to be a little bit of trivial, novelty, interiors, pretty things.
We love
so
pretty
yeah,
thing.
please don't overthink.
Okay, I shall try my hardest. Yeah.
Ready to go home or renovation project?
Ready to go home.
Minimalist or maximalist?
Maximalist.
DIY or hire trades?
Oh, you know what? I really love the experience of trying something that I haven't tried before and being like, wow, I can do this. This isn't that hard. Like, I totally nailed this. But having a professional do something, I do think is a trump card. But knowing that ultimately you could still do it if you don't want to or you can't afford to is the ultimate win. And then you're like, oh, it's a free choice.
Having enough money to hire trades.
Yes, literally. Exactly.
That's it then. Open plan or private zones?
I'm a private zones girl, especially when it comes to like if I'm using the space to make noise, I kind of don't want to feel like I'm interfering in especially if it's a shared home and I've got a housemate and stuff like that, or if you've got like partners that are over or friends or anything and I love hosting, I like the privacy.
Wallpaper or paint?
I did a lot of painting, but I do love wallpaper. So I'm going to say wallpaper because I haven't done it yet.
Dining table or TV meal?
Oh, I love a dining table, but I do so many TV meals. It's like aspirational dining table answer.
Okay, that's me too. Yeah. Like, no point in a dining table existing in my house. Big light or little lights?
Little lights and like a bunch of them and coloured bulbs.
Ooh, coloured bulbs. Carpet, yay or nay?
Oh, they're so cozy, but they're so annoying. I think I'm a wooden floor and rugs girl.
And new or vintage furniture?
I think it's got to be vintage. I just feel like everything that I buy vintage is so much better made. Mm-hmm. I know that's a really basic, I'm like, oh, everything's so badly made these days. But I don't know, I just do think that, there's so much craft and like amazing craftsmanship that goes into handmade like vintage furniture.
Yeah. Painted ceiling, yes or no?
Yes, but the back-breaking effort of doing it, like, tap me out, babe. I'm not interested.
That's it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Can't wait to welcome you back in here when it's done.
I can't wait to see it and I can't wait to hire you to help me with my corridors that I haven't designed yet. So.
I can't wait to hire you to help me to paint another wall.
Yeah, I will definitely be here in some kind of I don't know, onesie maybe is the vibe,
I've got some
apron.
ideas. Yeah.
Amazing.